Welcome to the TufFish Show. I am so excited to introduce to you Stephanie BwaBwa. I'm so happy you're here, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
This is going to be so much fun. So, would you please start by sharing how did you get into writing?
No, I love this question because I think like so many who are going to be listening to this, we all have the same journey. So I started reading first. I now hilariously enough, when I was like very, very small, around like 2, 3, 4, so my mom would buy me dating myself. So my mom would buy me like the super big like picture books that you would flip open. Some of them that I can remember were like Goldilocks and like the three bears. And like you could like flip in like the bears would pop up and Three Little Pigs with the wolves, like all of these different books. And then for like between around like 4 to like maybe 8-ish, I just like didn't read for some reason. And so and I am so like quick little trail. I'm Canadian, but we moved to the United States. We moved to Florida when I was around like 2. But then when I was 5, I went to go live in Haiti with my grandmother for a
Oh,
few
cool.
years. Yeah. And so I was in Haiti and, like just living the life there. But then when I came back to the States, I like lost my love of reading, and my mom was like, no, we're not doing that. And so she was like, you're going to read. And so she would keep like buying me like books from different genres. And finally I started reading fiction books, specifically by Roald Dahl. So like Matilda, The Switches, like all these different books.
Yeah.
Fell in love with them. Then I started reading like Judy Blume books, and then it was just like nonstop, right? And I know for some of you, you're like, oh my gosh, back in the day, yeah, like those were the good. I mean, there's good stories now. I won't like trash on Gen Z, but we really had some great books going up, and so I loved fiction. And then really, what got me into like the world right before I started writing was Lemony Snicket. Mom bought me A Series of Unfortunate Events, and that was it. It was a wrap. Like I started reading those books, and I was consumed by the like fictional worlds. And I love to just like either draw out sketches or like just like pen things. I never kept them. I should have, because now I wish like I could go back and be like, look at what I did when I was like 8. But I used to read, I used to just like put these words down, right? And so I think it was in middle school like I actually started writing. Not necessarily anything seriously, but I started picking up like other books. I started picking up fantasy books in middle school. And then in high school I really dove into what became my favorite series, which was the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare, which
Yeah.
of course Shadowhunters has like taken over the world. And I'm like, well, you guys didn't read it when I was reading it, like all the kids who think they know what a Shadowhunter is now. I'm like, no, okay. Um, and that's really when I started writing, and I realized like my heart for wanting to put my own stories into the world really drew from back then, because I would pen things here and there. And it was in 2013 that I actually was like, well, I want to write a book for publishing. Now, granted, it wasn't like me wanting to do that first. So for those who don't know, I am Christian, and I had reached a really low point. Praying was hard, and like going to church was a drag, and all of this stuff. And so I started writing out my prayers. And some of them that I wrote out, my mom was like, oh my goodness, these could be poems. And I was like, what? No, like, no, like these are prayers. um, and she was like, no, like seriously, like these could be poems. And somehow poems also manifested into me wanting to tell a story about this girl who's going through like loss and just figuring out her way in life, and she gets taken on this supernatural adventure, and that became the starting point for my first book. And so that was 2013 when I like really actually started writing, and I wanted to put a story, like a full book, a completed book, out into the world. But my love of storytelling was since I was a child. I mean, I can think of all the different stories that shaped me. I was the kid in school my textbook would be on the table and then my novel would be inside of the textbook. And so as the teacher would walk up and down the aisles, some of you kids don't know about that now because everybody's doing, virtual school, but like the teacher would walk up and down the aisle and be like, Stephanie, give me your novel. It wasn't like, give me your phone or like stop writing notes in class. It was give me the novel. And I'm like, no, and that would be like at a really good part too. Like the characters were going through it and things were blowing up, give me the novel. And I'd be like, okay. So,
Could you at least mark my spot?
yeah, let me just stick a bookmark in there, please. So that's when writing really started for me. It was in 2013. The love of it was from like back when I was a child, but I actually started to write for publishing in 2013.
Oh, I love that. I'm the kid who would take a paper over a standardized test any day of the week. I'm like, let me write something out. I will gladly turn in a paper over a standardized test if you give me a choice. So if you're talking about that, that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely was that child that like could, the tests where you had to like write out a story or like write out the scenario. I would knock those out in like seconds. Or like if we had a paper due, I was the child who never did her paper until like the day before, or like the morning up, because I knew I could just sit down and pound the words and I'd be like, okay, cool. And I would still get like an A or B on it and I'd be fine. So.
Me too. Me too. So, kindred spirit. So talk about the theme that I'm hearing though with Roald Dahl and the Lemony Snicket and obviously the Mortal Instruments, they're fantasy worlds. It's not just fiction, but it's fantasy. There's world building happening. And I know that you're a subject matter expert with that. But one of the world that you've created is Elledelle.
Yes.
So would you please talk a little bit about that world?
Yes. So Elledelle is my second home outside of Maryland. I absolutely love it, especially because Elledelle was born about 2016. I will say that like the idea for it was like in the ether somewhere, just buzzing around in the ether around like 2015. But 2016 was when I really sat down and I started just like putting ideas out there. And so Elledelle is my fantasy universe. I akin it to Narnia meeting Wakanda, about Black angels, magic, and mayhem. All of my characters are angels of different ranks. They have all different kinds of powers, and it's literally a mashup of Narnia and Wakanda.
I love that.
It's a smooth mashup. And Elledelle was born, so Christian kid here, right? So I was raised on like about angels and demons and supernatural life, right? Like we're gonna live, but then like this is the first life, there's heaven, there's hell, depending on how you live, you'll end up in one or the other, like that kind of thing. And so I was always intrigued by supernatural worlds. And I knew, okay, like I've read vampire stories and werewolves and all that, but I was like, I don't want to do that. And everybody was like writing about the Fae and like, all these different kinds of creatures. And I was like, well, I like angels.
Me too. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, I like angels and we don't talk about angels enough, so I'm going to. So ironically enough, okay, so Elledelle was born because I thought to myself, in the Bible, there is this story about how this all started, right? Lucifer is this beautiful angel. He is an archangel. He's the highest rank. He's made up of all these pipes in his body. He's gorgeous. He has music all throughout him. And he one day at a certain moment, he gets to a place where he's full of pride and he's like, well, why is God getting all the glory? Let me get some, right? And God is like, ha, that's cute, flicks him out of heaven. And so flicks him out, drops him in the earth or whatever this like ball of dirt was before all of us showed up here. And so I thought to myself, I wonder, because that's my brain. I was always that kid. I wonder. That's when like the imagination spiral. And so I was like, I wonder what happened between the time of the war in heaven But before, Lucifer gets kicked out, there's a war in heaven, but before he gets to earth, like, what could have happened in that little gap before this angel lands on earth and starts tormenting humans, but he's kicked out of heaven? And that's where the idea started. Like, he
Oh,
was my first character, and I wanted to tell the backstory of this character and
cool.
tell all of like the different events leading up to him doing whatever it took to become who he was, gets kicked out, triggers war between all of the angels and all of this stuff. And so when you're reading the first two books that are out right now, Seraphim Falling and Angel in the Shadow Court, in Seraphim Falling, you're introduced to this character called Agzedazriah, but they call him the Raven. This character is my Lucifer of sorts, and this is, now we're seeing him after those initial wars, but there will come a series in the future that will actually detail like all of these different events of how he was before he switched. And so that's how Elledelle became born. And I was like, I just want to tell stories about different kinds of angels. And for me, it was really important for me to tell a tale and to bring us into such a supernatural dimension that like readers, it kind of takes them a bit to get going. My goal was, I don't want you to think that anything about this is humans. There are no humans involved. It's very different. And so I enjoy it because I can take readers into a place where it's nothing but angels. And so like readers go into it and they're like, oh, angels. Okay. Like we've heard stories about angels. And they're like, oh, wait, no, it's angels versus angels. What? Like, you know what I mean? And then,
I
like,
love that.
right? And all the different like magics, and I allowed the child within me, right? C.S. Lewis, who encourages us to maintain that inner child. So I
Yeah.
allowed that child in me to be as wildly creative as possible. And of course, I draw a lot of inspiration from different universes. And like that was my goal, was to create a universe so that I could tell endless stories within that universe and like different worlds within it. And so that
Cool.
idea came from Marvel. I absolutely love what the Marvel Cinematic Universe does. I mean, you have all of these characters, and you're like, where in God, like, how, where did you come from? What? You know what I mean? Like, you have Thor, and then you have like, and you have Thor, you have Loki, you have like the humans, right, with the superpowers, and then so you have like Iron Man, and you have Black Widow, but then you have the Scarlet Witch. It's like, wait, what? You're a witch, but you're living in Earth. How did that happen? Like, you know, and you have all of these different characters that come from different places, but they can come together and unite on one cause. And so like this is me like slowly getting to this place where you have this massive world and different stories in it that are relevant to us today, but they're centered around angels. And so, yeah, that is like the start and like the slow expansion of
I
Elledelle.
love that. So would you offer a few tips to help somebody if they are just getting started in
Mhm.
building a world? Is there like one particular piece of guidance that you would say, this is where you would want to start? Or here's something to think about. Here's the tip to think about as you are building, or what to consider. Would you mind offering
Yeah,
something?
no, for sure. So it's funny because for years I thought that I approached world building from like a worldly overview aspect, like how they say start with a map and start with a timeline and know like where your deserts are and your rivers and your mountains and where is it cold, where is it hot, where is it tropical, like I thought that I approached world building like that, but I realized no, like world building really does start with character, right? Christian over here, Earth began for a man. Now, granted, Earth was created first, right? Splitting the seas, throw some sun into the air, let's go ahead and split it. Now we have land, now we have oceans, right? Now we have birds, now we have plants, now we have fish. But like all of that was for Adam, right? Like all of that was created for man. And so when you're starting with your world, think of a character. Ironically enough, mine was Lucifer, right? I mean, probably not the greatest start, but Mine was Lucifer, and it built out from there. And what I will say is beyond just starting with the character and like, and really seeing a character, not just like some vague image of, okay, I think they would get mad. I think they're, they want to do this or they want to do that, and when you're attempting the whole character perspective, right? It's okay, what do they want? What do they need? And answer why for both, right? So what do they want? Why do they want that? What do they need? Why do they need that? And then you build out from there. But once you have that character and okay, this is what they're trying to get, this is what they need to get, these are the things that they will deal with, and you can build out from there. I like to approach world building from two perspectives. So there's micro world building, as I call it, and macro world building. Macro is really dealing with just external factors. So that is the education system, right? Or the lack thereof, depending on what kind of world you're creating. That is the government. Every world has a government. I don't care how much you think, oh, well, it's anarchy. Trust me, someone's in charge. The buck stops at someone. So, the government structure, the spiritual powers, are there gods? Are there goddesses? Do people not believe in anything? Like, what does spirituality look like? There is always going to be someone worshiping something. What is that thing? Building out cultures, like that's really important, and I think sometimes we can forget that worlds are made up of different people groups, different tribes, people
Right.
who are
Yeah.
at war with each other simply because they're different. I wear my feathers this way, you wear your feathers that way, I don't like it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's always differences, right? Cultures, what are they eating? What are they wearing? How do they talk to their elders? How do they raise their young? All of these different things. But then, and that's like the macro part of it, right? Like it's all the external stuff. What are the buildings looking like? Academies or institutes? What are their jobs? How does life move forward, right? Let's just be real. If we all just stayed home and nobody worked, there would be that's no such thing. Like, you have to get up and do something with yourself besides twiddling the thumbs or watching Netflix all day. Now, I mean, granted, 2020, permission granted to like watch as much Netflix as you need to. However, like as we are getting back to quote normal life, right? There are things that we do. And so in your character's world, when you're thinking about that macro, that overview perspective, it's very big, it's very expansive. Are there different worlds? Does time move differently in different places? Are there different dimensions? Are there portals? What does transportation look like? All of that. But then when you're thinking about micro, you're building out from the character, right? And so you're thinking, okay, this character that I have, what's their worldview? Like, what do they see when they wake up every day? How were they raised? What streets are they walking on? What are they surrounded by? Because a lot of the times we are shaped by our environments. We are products of our environments. Literally, like, someone doesn't know that there can be change until they move and go somewhere else. And they realize, pause, this existed this whole time? What? Right? Like, and so that's how, from that micro perspective of, okay, who raised this character? What's around them? What are they teaching at the dinner table? Is there a dinner table? And if there isn't, why isn't there? What happened? And so that, from that very internal part of the character that you're dealing with, how their prejudices and their thought processes and how they were conditioned growing up, that's how they move about into the world. And so you can build out that world from there. Where are they going every day? Are they going to work? Are they going to an institute? Do they have a coach, a trainer, some type of mentor? Are they, because at the end of the day, starting off a book and like automatically sending them off on the quest, that makes no sense, because it's like, wait, no, like, it's like, what? No, like, we don't know their normal world. We don't know what every day is like for them. We need to understand that. And also, when you're approaching the micro perspective, think about the five senses, right? What are they hearing? What are they seeing? What are they touching? What are they tasting? What are they smelling? Right? Like, go through all of these emotions, right? And all of these different feelings. It's like, okay, this is what life is for me. This is what I feel. This is what I know. This is what I believe to be true. And so then you can go about describing what is around this character. What are they engaging with every day, with whether it's people or whether it's experiences, and then building out from there. Oh, okay, well, if they're this like desert individual, cool, I'm going to send them off on a quest where they're going to go to a world that's like a tundra, and they're going to hate it, and they're going to be miserable, and they're going to grow from it, right? Like, and that's like really like that's extra, but I mean, like, that's how you can build, right? You can either start from that overview where it's very external, right? How the character is engaging with the world around them, is it a sad, like, if you think about the Throne of Glass series. Now I need to like say all of this without dropping spoilers, even though it's been out for a very long time. But for the Throne of Glass series, right? Selena Sardothien, as she starts out anyway. She's like her normal world. She's an assassin, right? This girl wakes up at the crack of dawn, probably before that, to go perch on someone's house and watch them every day, waiting for the perfect moment to kill them. That sounds really scary for a 16-year-old, which is what she was. But that was her reality, right? And you experience the world through that, those external factors. She has, the leader of the assassins, but then there's also like the king of Otterlin, and the king is very cruel, and the people move with that kind of fear of, if I move out of terms, the king will kill me. But then on the inside, it's like, okay, how does she feel about this? She's angry, but she doesn't want to be angry. She's hiding secrets. Why is she hiding, right? So very much macro versus micro. And depending on who you are, plotters, I will say, will definitely tackle it from a macro perspective, because it's like, I want to know all these things. What are you eating? What are you wearing? Where are you going? What are you doing? I'm that person, which is why like I took years to build out Elledelle, like, and breaking down, for me, thinking about the macro perspective and looking at Elledelle, right? I have angels. There's 4 rankings, give or take, four main rankings of angels, right? And so if you're at the top, you're a seraphim, you have more wings, you have more hearts, like 7, yes, 7, 5 wings, you have elemental magic. You can actually take on the elements as your skin. You shed your skin, you become the power itself, that kind of thing. If you go to cherubims, they have less wings, less hearts. They have artistic magic, and they can wield that very creatively. You drop down another rank, you have the archons, right? Or your archangels, right? They can only wield magic. They don't have innate power, but they can wield magic. It's in a totem, it's in some type of thing that they keep on them, and they can use it at all times. Less wings, less hearts, lesser strength, if you will. And then you have the bottom of the food chain, the Anglins. They have no types of magical ability whatsoever. Now, compared to a human, they would have ridiculous amount of strength. But in the world of angels, they're literally like little peasants at the bottom, right? And so for me, on a macro level, that's me like, oh, okay, these levels of different ranks, what can they do? What can they not do? What, where do they live? How does life look for them? And this supernatural character that still has very real human limitations. But if I'm building from a micro perspective, I'm thinking of these characters. Where do they live? What are they being taught? How are they being fed? So that was a very long answer, but that's how I really break down world building. If you're a pantser, you're going to go from that micro perspective, because pantsers love to just get in the head of the characters and just go, right? Whereas with plotters, we're like, pause. We need to know everything first, and then we'll dive in. So.
Yep, I totally understand. And what you also were talking about, and a little bit that we had talked about before we actually started recording, was the development of having a strong villain. That when you have a strong villain, the villain is actually, it doesn't mean that you got to like them. In fact, you want that visceral reaction of, oh my gosh, this character is a jerk.
Absolutely.
But in the same breath, the stronger the villain, the more you feel the momentum moving into the book. You feel a lot of tension and conflict happening for the protagonist, and it provides them opportunities to grow.
Yeah.
However you want to look at that, it could be tormenting them, but it also could be, in the positive way, an opportunity for them to grow. And so I'm curious if you have, if you agree with that, of the idea of the strength behind the villain, for instance.
No, absolutely, I do. So it's scary to say this because it's like, as humans, we don't want to affiliate with anything that can remotely seem evil, right?
Mhm,
Because the majority of us, we really do try to be good.
mhm.
However, the best villains are the ones that you can find a part of yourself in. The best villains are actually very gray characters. There's nothing different from the villain versus the hero. The only difference is that the hero makes decisions that better them and better those around them, and the villain does not. They want the same things. It's just
Yeah.
the decisions that they make and the actions that they take and where that leads them, right? And so if you look at Thanos, I love using Thanos as an example. Y'all, if you haven't watched Avengers, I apologize. You know,
He's a good villain though.
but he's an amazing villain. Why? You hate Thanos, but at the same time, you understand him. You
Yeah.
understand him. Let's just be real. Thanos's entire logic is the universe is overpopulated. We do not have enough resources for all of y'all's mouths to be fed. Like we just don't. There's too many of you. So, since no one has the gonzos to make this decision, I'm going to do it for you. And here it is. Half of you shall die. Like, you know what I mean? And on the outside, you're like, how dare you? You know, self-righteousness. Oh my God. But then if you think about it, you're like, well, I mean, low key, high key, he's right. Like, there's not enough resources. If half of you die, then the rest of you can survive and you can multiply, and there can be generations that live after you. If all of you live, eventually we shall all die because there's not enough resources. Now, obviously that, I mean, it's incredibly cruel, right? Because you are killing off children and brothers, sisters, daughters, you know, best friends, people who had legacies. They died all at the same time because one man called himself Messiah, right? But it makes sense. It's terrible, but it makes sense. And that's the heart of a really good villain. It's, oh, well, yeah. Because good villains, listen, if you have someone who's evil just for the sake of like, I just want to blow stuff up, I just want to kill people. And it's like, okay, that's cute. Why? I don't care that you want to kill people.
That
Like,
would be kill your darling. That would
you
be
know what I
get rid of
mean?
that character.
Right. Like a good villain, you have to be able to connect with that character in some way. Like there's something about them, even if it's a tiny little part of you, that part of you still says, I understand that. That makes sense. I agree. I'm like low-key disturbed with myself that I agree. However, I agree.
Yeah. And it also is something that even if you can say, I understand where they're coming from, I don't have to even agree in the context of saying that's the same decision I would make, but
Yeah.
I can still understand their next action because you still understand the premise behind this space. So, but the main character, the protagonist might have gone in one direction. That might be the direction you would choose, but your villain's choosing this other one. And it's like, okay, I understand. Really, we have to do that. But yeah, I love how you explained that. I love how you explained that. This has been such a fun conversation, Stephanie. You are so fantastic. And if anyone is just listening to the podcast itself, the audio, please come watch our YouTube because this has been such a fun, lively conversation. You got to get the full effect of our joy here because we're having so much fun. But Stephanie, where can people connect with you? Where can they connect with you, and where can they find your books?
Yes. So with me, everything can be found at StephanieBwaBwa.com, from how to connect with me on social media, which y'all, I live on the gram. I mean, I'm on Twitter, barely on Facebook, but I am on the gram. But anything as far as like how to work with me, or, you know, how to connect with me or learn, you know, just to be able to write better fantasy, you know, write more immersive fantasy, StephanieBwaBwa.com. But to read my books, you can actually go directly to Elledelle.com. Like that website is dedicated solely to the books, to the characters. Bit by bit, I'm growing it out. I'll be putting more like character art on there so you can really, you know, get connected to these individuals that are making up this world.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so, so much, Stephanie. It has been a pure joy having you on the show.
Thank you for having me on.